Have you ever taken a moment to step back and think, why did I just do that? Simply put, self-reflection is a way to dig deeper into your feelings and find out why you were doing something or feeling a certain way. In this presentation, I'll try to shed some light on self-reflection as a PD activity. I'll start off by talking about what the literature says about self-reflection. I'll then highlight the importance of self-reflection and mention how it can improve your career as a teacher. Next, I'll point out some activities to use, followed by sample questions to ask, and wrap up the topic with two models of reflection. The first, a reflective cycle by Gibbs, and the second, a practical taxonomy that teachers can implement in their everyday practice. So let's get started. So what does the literature say about self-reflection? Finlay believes that reflective practice is learning through and from experience towards gaining new insights of self and practice. So you basically get to know more about yourself and about what works best for you. Bode et al. Argues that reflection in the context of learning is a generic term for those intellectual and affective activities in which individuals engage to explore their experiences in order to lead to new understandings and appreciation. It may take place in isolation or in association with others. In other words, it can be done individually or with peers. John Dewey, on the other hand, contends that we do not learn from experience, we actually learn from reflecting on experience. Clearly, Dewey acknowledges the importance of reflection. The experience alone does not necessarily lead to learning. You may be basically repeating the same mistake over and over again. It is actually the reflection that makes sense of the experience to us and hence makes the experience meaningful for us. Furthermore, Donald Shun describes reflection as enabling one to uncover knowledge in and on action. Shun suggests that in practice, reflection often begins when a routine response produces a surprise, an unexpected outcome, pleasant or unpleasant. The surprise gets our attention. When intuitive, spontaneous performance yields expected results, then we tend not to think about it. However, when it leads to surprise, we may begin a process of reflection. Finally, Chemist contends that we as teachers are inclined to think of reflection as something quiet and personal. The argument here is that reflection is actually action-oriented. So action is a very important word. It's not enough to just reflect. You need to take action. Social and political. Its product is praxis, informed, committed action. Again, very important word. Most eloquent and socially significant form of human action. As we noticed, there are many different opinions and options on what it is or how it should be done. But all of them try to prove the point that reflective practice should be considered as an option to help to improve. So why reflect? Effective teachers are first to admit that no matter how good a lesson is, our teaching strategies can always be improved. And self-reflection is important because it's a process that makes you collect, record, and analyze everything that happened in the lesson so you can make improvements in your teaching strategies where necessary. For example, it can help our professional growth. Reflective practice is the key to improvements. If teachers don't think about, analyze, and evaluate their professional practice, they cannot improve. Also, once teachers start to take ownership of their PD in this way, their confidence grows. Also, it helps us to keep up to date and it helps us to be innovative. Reflective practice allows teachers to create and experiment with new ideas and approaches to gain maximum success. Number 3, it's important for understanding learners. Reflective practice encourages teachers to understand their learners and their abilities and needs, of course. Why? Because it can help teachers to put themselves in the students' shoes. which is something many skilled teachers do. Brookfield believes that of all pedagogic tasks teachers face, getting inside students' head is one of the trickiest. And finally, it helps to develop reflective learners, because if the teacher practices reflection, they can more effectively encourage learners to reflect on, analyze, evaluate, and improve their own learning. These are key skills in developing them to become independent learners, which is something that all teachers aspire to. Connecting self-reflection to effective teaching is a process. The first step is to figure out what you want to reflect upon. The next step is collecting information. How can this be done? Of course, it can be done through many activities, one of which is a self-reflective journal. It's an easy way to reflect upon what just happened during your instruction. After each lesson, simply jot down a few notes describing your reactions and feelings, and then follow up with any observations you have about your students. Another activity that you can do is video recording. Video recording of your teaching is valuable because it provides an unaltered and unbiased vantage point for how effective your lesson may be from both a teacher and a student perspective. Additionally, a video may act as an additional set of eyes to catch, errant or behavior that you hadn't spotted at the time. Next up is student observation. Students are very observant and love to give feedback. You can hand out a simple survey or questionnaire after your lesson to get students' perspectives about how the lesson went. Think critically about what questions you'd like to ask and encourage your students to express their thoughts thoroughly. Then we have peer observation. Invite a colleague to come into your classroom and observe your teaching. To help them frame your lesson critique more clearly, create a questionnaire for your colleague to fill out as they observe. Afterwards, make some time to sit down with them so they can more accurately convey what they saw. Now, whether you're using a self-reflective journal or trying to get feedback from your students and peers, perhaps the hardest part is actually coming up with the right questions to ask. Here are a few suggestions to get you started. For example, here are some questions to ask about lesson objectives. Was the lesson too easy or too difficult for the students? Did the students understand what was being taught? What problems arose? About materials, for example, you can ask, did the materials keep the students engaged in the lesson? What materials did we use that worked in the lesson? What didn't work? Are there any resources or techniques that you'd like to see used instead? About the students, were they on task? What parts of the lesson did they seem most engaged with, least engaged with? And then about the teacher, how effective was the overall lesson? What can I do better next time? How did I deal with any problems that came up during instruction? And for example, was I perceptive and sensitive to each student's needs? You can ask questions about classroom management. Were my instructions clear? Was the lesson taught at a reasonable pace, or it was a bit too fast, or maybe perhaps too boring? Did all students participate in the lesson? And so on. Finally, moving on to models of reflection. Of course, there are many models of reflection that you can use, one of which was developed by Gibbs. Gibbs, in writing about learning, created a useful way of going about reflection. He suggested the following process. So first, you start with the description, a detailed description of the event. Where was it? What was the context? Who was there? Why were you there? Etc. Then feelings. Try to remember what you were feeling. What were you thinking about? How did it make you feel? Etc. And then evaluation. What was good and bad about it? Moving on, you go to the analysis. You break down the event and explore them separately. What did you do and others do well? What could you and others have done better? And so on. Coming to the conclusion, having explored the issue from all the above perspectives, what conclusion do you come to? You may need to draw from your insight and all you have learned from the above exploration. Finally, it's time for action. All of this reflection is nothing without action. You need an action plan. Taking all of this into account, what would you do differently? What did you learn? What can you apply to other situations? And finally, here is another interesting model that I like based on Bloom's taxonomy. This was developed by Peter Pappas, and he calls it taxonomy of reflection. So he starts with the first Bloom's remembering, and he asks the question, what did I do? For example, what was the lesson? Did it address all content? Was it completed on time? And then you move on to the second stage, which is understanding. What was important about it? Did I meet my goals, for example? Can I explain the major components of the lesson, etc. Then we move to the application stage. Where could I use this again? So basically, what did I do this before? Where could I use it again? Did I build on content, product, or process? How does this lesson scaffold learning for the next lessons, etc.? Then you analyze, do I see patterns in what I did? For example, what background, knowledge, and skills did I assume students were bringing to the lesson? Were the instruction strategies I used the right ones? Do I see patterns in my teaching style? What were the results of the approach I used? Then we go to the evaluation part, which we all know about. How well did I do? What worked? What didn't work? And finally, to the action or creating part. And here, in this part, basically, what should I do next? What's my plan? How would I incorporate the best aspects of this lesson in the future? What changes would I make? And so on. Well, that's it. I hope you have enjoyed my presentation. I hope you've learned something from it. Thank you so much, guys, and have a great day.